Hello, my name is Reverend Gordon Kieft. I've been asked to talk about the topic of ending gun violence, partly because I'm on the steering committee of what's called CFCU, which stands for Colorado Faith Communities United to End Gun Violence. And Calvary is a member of that coalition, of which there are at least 45 congregations currently. I'd like to begin by making one statement. By the time the clock strikes midnight tonight, the end of a single day, at least 100 Americans will be shot and killed by a bullet from a gun. It's a number not matched by any other developed country in the world. And for us as people of faith especially, and other people too, I think of it as a call to action. I'm going to share a few statistics from the years 2019 and 2020. The range of gun deaths, as far as we can tell, is close to 45,000 per year in the United States. That number varies a little bit depending on the sources, but it's consistent for the last several years. And in Colorado, I'll make a few other comments. In 2019, there were 856 deaths in Colorado, and in 2020, 925. And of the 925, 240 were homicides, and 651 were suicides. 24 were from intervention, such as police, 6 were unintentional or accidental, and 5 were unintended or unidentified. And in terms of percentages, in 2020, 15% of total gun deaths per 100,000 population was the percentage. Of that number, only 4% were homicides and 10.6% were suicides. So from those numbers, you can get the point that about 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. I'd like to now talk a little bit about overcoming some of the myths that I think are getting in the way. One of the major ones is that anybody interested in focusing on eliminating or ending gun deaths are people who are wanting to take guns away, whether it be Democrats or some of our past presidents. But none of the laws that have been put into effect are taking anybody's guns away. Another myth is that the best way to approach a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's the NRA approach. Well, that's proved to not be helpful and not effective either. Another myth is the best way to end school massacres is to arm teachers. And I have yet to find a teacher or a principal or see anyone interviewed that thinks that's the way to go. Another myth is that it's all about mental health. And I hear some folks saying that we certainly need more mental health coverage. Yes, we do. But other countries have a lot of mental health issues as well, but they don't have the kinds of gun deaths we have. So what's the difference? I think the difference is guns. It's estimated that we have 400 million guns in the United States, and we have about 330 or 40 million people. So more guns than people. I've also been asked to talk about approaches. How can we be active in dealing with some of these issues? Well, there isn't any one particular approach, but there are many that we have to use. And while some people say, what's the point? Whatever we try won't work. Well, I use the analogy of seat belts in cars. Some people said that wouldn't make a difference. Obviously, seat belts is not going to eliminate deaths from car accidents, but it certainly has reduced the numbers over the years. That's the approach with approaching ending gun violence as well. So I suggest that we, first of all, try to enforce and support the Colorado laws that we now have. One of the main ones that we have, and we're trying to make that happen at the national level, is called the Red Flag Bill. And we have some more letters, ERPO, we say, which stands for Extreme Risk Protection Orders. And what that means is there's a possibility of going to the police and filing like a restraining order for anyone we think of who is suicidal or suspected of being suicidal or homicidal, and removing the weapons from that particular person for a short period of time, after which there's a hearing to determine whether it's valid or not. It's been used many times, and particularly in protecting suicide, it's been effective. Another relatively new law is safe storage in Colorado. I urge you to all support the safe storage law, which means if you have guns in the home, they should be stored and locked. And a corollary to that is using a trigger lock for any gun rather than locking it up, but a trigger lock so it can't be used. Then I encourage you to support candidates who support laws that will tend to reduce gun violence, such as supporting background checks at all levels for all gun sales and gifts. And also another law that's been implemented in Colorado is reporting guns that have been stolen or lost, so that when there is a gun that's used in a crime, it can be identified more easily. Especially work toward banning all the kinds of automatic weapons that we've experienced being used in these school shootings, AR-15s and AK-47s. These are military-style weapons that aren't needed by the population. So do whatever you can to support candidates who are willing to take a stand and try to ban those. The next one is supporting the limited magazine capacities. In Colorado, the law is 15 bullets per magazine. In many states, it's higher than that by quite a bit. It perhaps should be lower, even down to 10. But the point there is that when there is an automatic weapon, if a person has to stop because they run out of bullets, it will at least slow the process down. Also, support laws against open carry anywhere in the state. Denver has just passed another law to restrict open carry in parks or any kind of government buildings. And they also are encouraging those who are licensed to carry concealed weapons to not do that in city parks. So I suggest the one thing we can do there is to vote for candidates, local and state and federal, who are concerned about valuing human life, about protecting the safety of all people in our area, as opposed to supporting people buying more guns. Also support the anti-hate groups, one of which is the Southern Poverty Law Center. They're very instrumental in helping identify some of the underlying causes of people who use guns, and that is the issue of hate. And what's really personal, I think, for me, having been in the mental health profession, is suicide prevention. And one of the things we always say in suicide prevention, if someone is talking about it, take it seriously. Well, it's the same thing for a potential homicide or someone using a gun to do violence. If someone's talking about it, take it seriously. So it's not a joke. It's something that we need to take seriously and then act, do something. One additional point I'd like to suggest, something I don't ordinarily recommend, and that's single issue voting. I know it happens with those who are against abortion. They vote for a candidate no matter what the candidate stands for except that issue. I wonder if it's at a point where we need to think about single issue voting for those who are concerned about ending gun violence. At least keep that in mind in terms of supporting candidates. Another point to support is a waiting period after someone buys a gun, such as 3 days. That's not a law in Colorado, I don't think, at this point, but it could be. So consider that as well. But a final comment about those of us who are part of a faith community. And that's what our coalition is really about. How do we deal with the fear and anxiety that we all experience? And sometimes some groups are saying, well, the answer to deal with your fear is to buy a gun. As part of a faith community, I suggest we turn to our faith community for support. We turn to faith itself and the idea of a loving God who provides a caring presence, a soothing presence, and a sense of peace in our lives is another part of our approach. So turn to our faith community, turn to our God for an answer to the fear and anxiety in our community, in addition to the other options that I've suggested. Love really does make a difference.
Amen on behalf of the last and the least, on behalf of the anxious, depressed, and unseen. Amen for the workers, the hungry, the houseless. Amen for the lonely and recently spouseless. Amen for the queers in their closeted peers. Amen for the bullied who hold in their tears. Amen for the mothers of little black sons. Amen for the kids who grow up scared of guns. Amen for the addicts, the shamed and hungover. Amen for the calloused, the wise and the sober. Amen for the ones who want life to be over. And amen for the leaders who lose their composure. Amen.